So yes, thanks everyone for joining. Just by way of quick introduction, so my name's Tiernan. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO at Hello Lamppost, which you might hear a little bit more about during some of the presentations. But just to set the scene for today, for this webinar, so we've got some really exciting panelists. So I'm not going to be the one boring you talking today. You're actually going to hear some interesting people who I'll introduce in a minute, but really a variety of organisations and roles that we're going to hear from on the panel, and really hearing about how they're approaching the importance of kind of community engagement and promoting public safety, but also how they're approaching, their organisations are approaching how technology can be used for good, really focused around building more sustainable communities. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we kick off. So everyone is muted on purpose, so that's not an error, but feel free to have your camera on if you'd like to. In the chat functionality, which you should see a button at the top, feel free throughout to post your questions for any of the panelists. And what we'll do is we've left some time at the end and we'll pick a few of those to be asked to the panelists. And as mentioned before, this session is recorded, so we'll be sharing that recording after the fact. And I'll just reiterate how that's going to be shared and when that will be shared at the end of the presentations. So without further ado, I will just introduce our panelists. For those who have just joined in the last minute or so, as the slide says, my name is Tiernan. I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders at Hello Lamppost. We'll first be hearing from Tom from the Environment Agency. So Tom looks after how to increase community resilience to flooding across Devon and how to help those communities and partner organisations adapt to the pressures of the oncoming climate changes. We're also joined by Jack Rasby, the Campaigns Manager at South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue. So a completely different organisation, and his role primarily focuses around planning and evaluating community safety and looking at behaviour changes, making people safer in their homes and reducing the number of kind of incidents the fire service has to attend. Hopefully they're fair summaries. And then last but not least, we're also joined by Kathy, who's the founder of DigiKind, which is an award-winning company that helps towns and cities to rebuild, in particular their high streets. Kathy's background, I know Kathy very well, and her background is highly regarded in the digital transformation and supports a lot of local communities, local councils and businesses with their community engagement and empowerment. So really exciting. Please remember just to fire questions into the chat throughout and we'll pick them up at the end for the panelists. But that's enough rambling on from me. I'm going to hand over to Tom to get on with the good stuff in his presentation.
Thanks, Tiernan, and thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Tom Dorban, as Tiernan said, and I'm here to describe a little bit about what we've been doing with the Hello Lamppost team at the Environment Agency. So if we can skip on to the next slide, I'll just briefly describe what our organisation does. So for those of you who may not know about the Environment Agency, we are a governmental department. We are sort of what's called an arm's length body, but we tackle all sorts of environmental issues. And we have investment from government, which allows us to promote projects, deliver solutions, provide regulatory resources, all the things you see on the slides there, all kinds of different aspects of managing the environment. The particular area that I work in, and my colleagues that have been working with Tiernan's teams in the red bordered box around flooding and coastal change. So it's a really big area of work for us. We have a £5.2 billion programme for England between 2021 and 2027 to tackle that problem. And obviously we have lots of pressures from climate change, sea level rise, increased river flows, all the sorts of things Tiernan alluded to a second ago. So we are exploring one box of what we do, but we do try and link in other messages through the Hello Lamppost tools where we can. We can skip on to the next slide, please. I'll just go into a bit more detail about how we're tackling flood and coastal risk management in England. So previously we had a role which was very much about defending communities from flood risk, trying to protect them. and trying to prevent the problem occurring in the first place. And I think that's been fine until we've had the increased pressures of climate change recently, which is starting to become more and more prevalent. For example, down where I live in southwest England, we have the potential for up to nearly 90% increases in peak river flows from climate change by about 2080. So not that far into the future, there could be some significant changes to the problems we're dealing with. So continuing to protect people from flooding isn't realistic, and continuing to protect people from coastal erosion and their homes falling into the sea also isn't realistic. A couple of years ago, we did some work on a new national flood and coastal erosion risk management strategy for England. And the strap line from that strategy is on the left-hand side of the screen. So it's all about trying to create a resilient nation to those issues by 2100. There's three kind of key themes that sit below that. Climate resilient places is very much about using regeneration, using existing opportunities within communities to try and promote net gain, net increase in resilience to the community. The second one is very much about looking at the things that support living in a community: power, utilities, transport networks, commerce, all of those things which we rely upon and can often be impacted by a flood. And the final one is all about the role of the community themselves, and trying to get them prepared, trying to educate them on the issues, and trying to get them organised and formed into flood groups. So typically when we go and run a project in a community, or we do some flood warning related activities, we work with community flood groups. And if we can skip on to the next slide, we have an example of one of the sort of traditional sessions on the left-hand side there. So the way that we used to engage with communities, and indeed we do and we will still do into the future, pre-COVID certainly, was very much face-to-face drop-in sessions. So on the left-hand side there, we have a session which we ran in a small town in Devon, where people were invited along to come and share their knowledge of flooding, provide us with photos. We did the same reciprocally to them. And we were talking about what we could do in that community to increase the level of protection. Now that's very resource intensive. You can see, without wishing to be rude, there's a certain demographic shown in that photo because we have to organise it during working hours. So we are only reaching a certain portion of the community, maybe once or twice during the life of a 5-year project. On the right-hand side, we've got a new method that we're trying with the Hello Lamppost team. And we've got signage up in similar communities, not that exact one, but similar ones with similar solutions. That's right next to a new piece of flood wall we've built fairly recently. That's engaging people more 24/7. We have that presence in the community much longer term. We're attracting different audiences. And I'm not saying it's purely going to replace the old method of engaging, but the two are really complementary to one another. And I think it's just another tool in our arsenal, the Hello Lamppost capabilities that we're working on. If we can skip on to the next one, please. So where are we working? We've got 5 locations which we're working with Tiernan's team. They're all scattered across Devon and Cornwall, and they're all for very different reasons. So I've talked a bit about flooding and coastal change. There's a whole host of different ways that we can tackle those problems. Some of them are around adaptation to sea level rise and pressures like Bude on the top left-hand side on the North Cornwall coast. Others are around looking at the upper catchment, the area where the water comes from in a flood above a community, and what we can do to slow it down. So that's the Dartmoor example, which brings in a lot of the other aspects of our business, how we can do environmental improvement, how we can improve water quality, those kinds of things. The others are all part of projects which we're either in the process of developing, have delivered, and are reintegrating back into the community, or are just setting out on and are seeking feedback around. So we've got a few different themes and a few different status of projects which we're working on. The work with the HLP team really started in the West Country after a conference we attended a year or two back, and we saw what the capabilities of the tool were. But there's been interest in other sites around the country. There's some work going on in the Northeast as well now, and I'll allude to some other work that's going on in a second. But that's the application of the tool for us. It's very much feedback from communities about the problem, their thoughts on it, and allowing us to convey messages about products that we have, whether that's the ability for them to sign up to receive flood warnings, to check whether their home is at risk of flooding, or to signpost into things that can give them advice on what to do when a flood happens and to be more prepared. We can go on to the next slide, please. So, key learning from what we've been doing. We haven't deployed the signs on Dartmoor yet, but they're just in the process of being commissioned. So the statistics there you can see are for sort of partial deployment from where we've got to with those locations. We've had a reasonable number of interactions and different users that are engaging with the tool. But the interesting thing is comparing it back to that old way of engaging that we had. So under that method, we'd have been in and out of those communities maybe a handful of times, whereas this allows us to have that continued presence. So by having the tools that we have at our disposal with Hello Lamppost, I think that purely those statistics have reached typically maybe the number of people we'd have had to about 30 or 40 of those traditional events. Now that's a fantastic increase in the amount of time we can spend with that community and the amount of feedback that we can gain from them. Being the sort of body that we are, we're really interested in the environmental impact of what we do, as well as the opportunities it provides people. So one of the key things we're trying to do at the moment is become carbon neutral by 2030. Now, it seems a little bit weird to talk about tech and how that can actually save us carbon when we're talking about server usage and texting and the emissions of carbon associated with that. But when you compare it with the amount of people traveling to those old events and the amount of setup that we have and time we have to put into those kinds of things, we think we're going to achieve close to a 5-ton carbon saving by doing that work in the West Country. The more sites that go in, the more carbon saving there is for that engagement activity elsewhere. We don't have enough people to do all of that engagement, and as you probably gathered from what I'm saying, there's potentially some slightly difficult conversations in there about, do people live in the right place? Is it sustainable for them to live in that location given the pressures they'll be under in the future? And that requires really focused conversations with a lot of resource to support. So doing some of the more transactional aspects of community engagement was quite taxing on that resource. So by having the tool in place has allowed us to focus the resource where it's better able to be used. We have a whole host of things on the gov.uk website, the government website, but it's quite fragmented. And to allow us to put them into a sort of logical conversation means we can signpost people to a lot of materials and a lot of support and advice they can obtain in a more digestible format. Just leaving them at the mercies of gov.uk might mean that they're going to be finding tax returns when they're trying to find flooding information. So it's a much more coherent conversation for them to be part of than looking for things on their own. We found the conversation design really interesting and actually injecting some fun and some easier, more relatable aspects to the conversation. So for example, we've got in there things like it only takes an egg cup of water to ruin your car if you drive through floodwater. It's a slightly less formal type of engagement that allows us to easily inject things like that in there. It also, building on from that, allows us to put in sort of leading messages and starting to plant the seed of where things may be going in communities in the future without having to be open and fully disclose, the extent of the impacts. It allows us to softly introduce concepts into conversations with communities. So those are the key kind of learning points. I think that's my last slide, if I remember rightly. Oh no, one more, sorry. We have a big national conference called Flood and Coast, which we run with the Chartered Institute of Water and Environmental Management. That's going on next month. Tiernan and the team are going to be there as part of that conference. So if anybody's signed up to go, it will be part of the innovation hub that's there, the work that we've been doing. But we're also exploring, as I alluded to earlier, another deployment of the tool. So we're going to have a virtual object, which is not going to be attached to a specific location. And we're going to have QR codes that allow people to engage across England if they wanted to. It's a more widely usable resource. So we're just in the middle of designing the artwork and the conversations for that, which will be launched at the conference. So if anybody would like to see a little bit more, I'll be there. Tiernan will be there as well. And I'm sure we'd be happy to have a chat about what we've been doing. I think that's it for me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dom. Really interesting. Thanks for flying through so much information. I will just pass straight over to Jack then in that case.
Thanks, Tiernan. Hello, everybody. I've already been introduced. I'm not going to go over that, but I'm Jack. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the work we've done as a fire service with Hello Lamppost. I've only got limited time, so I'm going to speak quick, but my intention is to sort of cover a bit of an introduction to our service and what we do and how we operate, look at the problem that we kind of wanted to solve through our work with Hello Lamppost. Look at actually what we've done, which is the most exciting part, I guess, and then importantly look at sort of our outcomes. So if I can have the next slide, please. So we are South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue. We cover South Yorkshire, obviously, serve around 1.4 million people. Our core aim is in there. That's probably the most important part of this slide, really, is making South Yorkshire safer and stronger. So obviously, the fire service is known best for its 999 response, the sort of shiny fire engines flying around on blue lights. That is still our core job, and that's still our core reason for existing. I guess we are here to respond to incidents, but certainly over the last 10 years, even more now, we've had sort of a statutory duty to prevent fires as well and other incidents. Like I say, it's been 10 years of fire safety education. If people have got kids, they may be aware of, firefighters going into schools and talking to young people. We go to events and talk to people young and old. We do campaigns, which is a big part of my work in terms of public safety and social media kind of campaigns. And then I'll come on to some of the other stuff we do in a bit. But ultimately, sort of nationwide, a lot of that work from fire services has seen a massive reduction in fires and in that 999 response. But ultimately, there's always more to do. We still are attending fires and incidents. So next slide, please. So in terms of our problem and what kind of brought us down this road, it kind of follows on directly from what I've just said. So there is more to do. That graph in the top right just shows, a big decline in what we call accidental dwelling fires, aka sort of house fires, kitchen fires, electrical fires, that kind of thing, in line with sort of a big increase in what we call home safety checks. And that's one of the ways we make people safer. That involves going into people's homes. It might be a fire crew or more specialist staff, depending on the level of risk. They will go in, they'll talk to people about, how they live their life. They'll give safety advice around things like cooking, around, using electrical sockets, electrical items, identify risks, fit smoke alarms, etc., all that kind of thing. And then off they go, hopefully having made that that household safer. And if they need to, they will also make referrals to other agencies. Obviously, I guess there's two sides to our problem. There's the bigger context, which is the sort of the bigger issue, which is that we do all our work, but as with any public service, our funding is kind of shrinking slowly but surely. But we still have to do our work. I've already said we've still got more to do. There's still more. We still do attend hundreds of house fires every year. Sadly, people are still dying in fires or getting hurt in fires. So we know we want to do more and keep working to reduce these incidents. But ultimately, we don't have any more resources necessarily to do that. We kind of have to keep working with what we've got. And then I guess the smaller, it's not a small problem, but the more specific problem that we're wanting to solve is around those home safety checks. So I've kind of explained what that check is and how it works. That will take a fire crew to go out and do that visit. So that's time, it's people, it's resources. Even if it's a more specific visit, a high risk visit, we'll still be sending 2 or 3 people into a home to do that check. So there's only so many of them we can do each year, as well as everything else we have to do as a fire service. So speaking of operational crews, training, actually attending the 999 calls, all those things. For that reason, within South Yorkshire, I know other services do a similar thing. We do only go and give those visits to people that are identified as high risk. So that's about allocating our resources to people that need it most. We can't get to every home, unfortunately. So we will go to the most vulnerable. That obviously means that there are people who you might say are low risk, who we won't go and visit. And that's not necessarily because we don't want to go and visit these people. It is, we only have so many resources. And there are sort of hundreds of people every year that do request a visit that we're not able to go and see. Now, we have a criteria that's been built up over the years around what is high risk, what is low risk. But ultimately, you can still be low risk. That doesn't mean to say that you're not anxious around fire. It doesn't mean to say you've got no risk at all. It doesn't mean to say that you won't benefit in some way from some kind of support or intervention from the fire service. But again, we can only do so much. Next slide, please. So that's where talking lampposts coming, or perhaps they don't actually in this example. But in terms of how can talking lampposts alone help reduce fires, not a straightforward answer, because this case study isn't actually involving a physical object. This is a virtual object. However, from working with the Hello Lamppost team and our community safety team and my team and colleagues, we kind of felt that we could use the technology that sits behind the talking objects to help make people safer through the use of sort of a virtual object. So the technology is the same, but we just don't have a physical bin or lamppost or whatever it may be that people engage with. People engage with us sort of in the cloud, I guess is a way of describing it. And so what we did, sort of with the target audience being those lower risk people who I've already mentioned, we won't go out and visit those people. We still want to be able to offer them something. Sort of enter this. So you see it on the right, the virtual home safety check. So this is where somebody can scan that QR code or text a number, and we will essentially have a conversation with them. We've built up the conversation. We'll give them advice. We will answer questions. We will forward them on to more information on our website if necessary. We will adjust our responses to whatever they say, whatever they tell us. And ultimately, we actually follow the same process. The virtual check follows the same process as a physical check. So if someone goes into your home, they ask a series of questions. This virtual check asks the same kind of questions, but it is obviously designed for a mobile phone. It's not going to be as detailed. It's not as long. And certainly I would say, particularly if there's any fire service colleagues on here, we don't claim that this virtual check is a replacement for a home safety visit. It's not the same as an in-person visit. It never will be. This for us is a way that we can, without sending anybody out, without having to use people or, sending appliances out to go and visit people, we can give people advice, reassurance, and ultimately, if we do think that they need a visit, because we will track how they answer, if people kind of raise a red flag to us that maybe they smoke in bed, for example, we will say, actually, we think you do need you are higher risk, you do need a proper check. And so that's essentially what we've created. Can I have next slide, please? So in terms of the outcomes of the work we've done, as I say, I guess the first outcome that I've not really mentioned on these slides is that we developed a working virtual check, and that was quite an achievement, really. You move on very quickly from stuff like this, but the check does work very well. The feedback we've had is very positive around people that have engaged with it. They text a number, they get a response. I think Tom mentioned before, it's also a very human system, so the response they get is very human. It's light, it talks about the weather and stuff like that. So that's a huge positive for us, and it works, and it works well, and we know that people have been able to engage with that. In terms of specific outcomes, obviously this whole thing is about getting people to take these checks and make themselves safer. We've had so far, and this is very much just a start really in terms of numbers, but we've had 500 conversations, so that's 500 homes really made safer through this work without us having to even turn a wheel. Something else I'm quite keen on is that we do have that referral thing in, so if people do raise a red flag, we'll go and visit them. 150 home safety visits have taken place that came from somebody doing this virtual check. So not only are we kind of supporting those lower risk people and making them even safer, we've identified people that would have maybe been totally gone under the radar. We've identified those people and gone into their homes and made them safer, which is, this isn't just targeting the lower risk, this is helping the most vulnerable as well. And as I say, it's on the slide there, this has largely been organic. We have got more work planned to really start pushing this out and using this as a weapon is definitely the wrong word, as a tool really for us as a service. We can offer a physical check, but also if you're not quite at that level of risk, have a look at this, scan this code, we'll give you a virtual check, and that hopefully will help us really, hit so many more people across the county. And then lastly, just the next slide, please. Just in terms of the future, lots more virtual safety checks complete. That's what we want. We want more people doing this. We want more homes made safer. Longer term, we can start to look at, the comparisons between how much it costs to do a physical check, how much does it cost to do a virtual check. Can we get to a point where we can say, for £1 each time we deliver, £1 per check, we're making someone safer. That'd be a really great achievement for us in our context. And ultimately as well, we want to open ourselves up more, to have more engagement, offer ourselves as a service that, you can contact us in so many different ways, and this is just another way. And obviously we are working with Hello Lamppost on some other things as well, such as sort of the widget on our website, which means that people can come on our website, ask us questions, engage with us in that way. So it's not just us broadcasting information, we'll have a chat with somebody. And also talking fire stations, that's a different beast entirely. But again, that's about offering ourselves up as, where we have fire stations where people might not be around all the time. If you walk past, you want to ask us a question, you can still do that. And that's it. I think I'll hand over back to Tiernan now.
Right, yeah, thanks, Jack. That was really good. And again, I'm not sure quite how you fit all that information into 6 or 7 minutes. I will hand straight over to Kathy. But if anyone does have, just a reminder, if anyone does have any questions, pop them into the chat window. I think we've had a couple come through, but yeah, feel free to put them into the chat for any of the panelists. Yeah, over to you, Kathy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy, and I worked on the engagement with my Royal Borough, or the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead. And next slide, please. I think the best way for me to explain what we do at DigiKind is to talk about what we did with the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead. Can I have the next slide, please? So we were engaged with RBWM to help instill public confidence in shopping locally and to help people to get through the lockdowns. We were engaged in 2020 in July, and we were kind of in and out of various stages of the pandemic's lockdown. And we launched a campaign called Don't Let Your Guard Down, which I really love this image because it's the epitome of engaging a local business, ducks, and the community, because we were really able to tap into the local community to generate goodwill and to generate support. I knew from the get-go that I really wanted to engage Hello Lamppost, or to encourage the council to engage Hello Lamppost in this effort, because I knew that they would be integral to the success of the entire engagement. So we were on board for almost a year before we got HLP to join us. But let me tell you how we got there. So what we do at DigiKind is to build communities utilizing different tech for good tools, digital transformation tools, everything from social media to creating online business directories, to websites, to business hubs for consultations, and to creative campaigns. And so together with the council, we created this digital space called My Royal Borough, what I call a digital ecosystem, so that we could engage the local council, the community partners, locals, and businesses, so that we could give people the digital skills to share their local. And everything from supporting the Eat Out to Help Out campaign to pledges. But we only got to a certain point with that. And when we brought HLP on board, it kind of took it to the next level. And I'm really excited that we were able to do that. So we know that people want to be consulted. We know that in order for us to really inform our welcome back approach, we knew that we wanted to talk to the locals and find out where they were at. And we knew that we would help the council, and we'd be able to really help them with data and turn that into insight by engaging the local community. So the goal at RBWM was to create this space where everyone felt empowered to share how they were feeling about lockdown, where their favorite places were to shop and eat, to understanding what the local tourism places were. So where were their favorite places to go when they visited the borough, that council right there? Where were their favorite places to shop and eat? They would share that information with us in a more compelling way by using Hello Lamppost. Can I have the next slide, please? So this was our approach. We did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of stuff on our own, but when we actually implemented HLP, we were able to kind of get down to what the locals were actually thinking and feeling. So our approach was to create this integrated three-pronged approach, utilizing creative campaigns, community building, and business training and support. We created something that was not too council. Sorry, no offense to anyone who works for a council, but nothing too corporate. That was the council's words. They didn't want anything to be too corporate. They wanted it to have like a nice look and feel. So we illustrated everything. We created that guard, and we created something that started out that was kind of friendly and easygoing, and then we created our welcome back based upon that. So that "Don't Let Your Guard Down" campaign, next slide please, was something that was on street. We had these life-size guards that we put everywhere, all over Windsor, and we put the QR code on him, and people could talk to him. They could, we could put information out that basically said, you know, please socially distance, but also, how are you feeling about the pandemic, and what are you looking for locally on street? And then it evolved. And what was great about HLP is that it could evolve with us. It could evolve with the needs of the council. It's really agile. And then we would expand that from not just the guard, but to benches. So please socially distance. Don't sit on this bench, sit on that one. And then also we used it on bollards and at the Guildhall, with the museum, with our museum partners, and in the bus stops, and over at the bandstand and the train station, and over at Queen Vic, you could chat with Queen Vic. And so it was just really a comprehensive approach towards our work. And on our side, on the comm side, we wanted to create this omni-channel approach towards, and which we did, created this omni-channel approach towards comm. So we had A4s. We had a local business offer to print all of our free A4s for all the local businesses in Windsor, which was fantastic. We created toolkits, and we created promotional materials for the businesses, and everyone really got on board. Everyone was taking selfies with all of our guards. I see a question in the chat, which I can answer in a bit if you want me to, about vandalism. The businesses were really protective over the guards. If someone did steal one, or if one flew down the street, Paper Chase actually grabbed one and stuck it in inside their window for us. So they were very protective over them, which was fantastic. You know, it was a fantastic program. HLP would provide us with weekly reports, so we would know exactly what was happening, so that we could be really agile in our approach and responses. And then it really helped me be responsive and write the welcome back approach and strategy. So as lockdown eased, the campaign also evolved. So it evolved into more of a tourism campaign, because we could see we had 10,000 engagements on this campaign, which is incredible. So we found that 66% of people were feeling sad that they couldn't, you know, actually, can we go? Yep. Thanks, Francesca. You're amazing. We found that users wanted to, they wanted to get back to the high street. And so it informed my planning when I wrote the Welcome Back campaign. It was just really helpful. It provided us the insight that we needed so that we could be responsive. And then as we shifted away from public health messaging, we moved it into what are you looking forward to when you get back to the high street? What kind of events do you want to see? It just really elevated our marketing approach. And as a brand person, as a marketing person, I need to understand what the sentiment is. And it just really empowers me, and it empowers the council to make the right choices when I'm writing an economic development strategy, because, you know, funding's limited. We don't have all the money and time in the world to be able to write these things and to execute on these projects. And so it's important for us to understand what the sentiment is, and that informs our work. So that's really invaluable. It's really, really helpful for us to understand what the public wants and says. And when it comes to building a sustainable, not sustainable on the EA side, but the sustainable, resilient, future-proofed high street, we need to know what citizens want. You can't just, you know, work in a black hole. You really need to understand what people are saying. So using a platform like this not only elevates but it amplifies what we're trying to do. And it was incredible. We got coverage of our campaign in the Times and the Guardian 3 times, and the New Scientist. We also were shortlisted for a Drum Award for PR. We didn't win, but it's still nice. It's still nice to be recognized. So yeah, I feel like it was just an amazing, not even a tool in our toolbox. It was just a platform that helped to raise the bar. So yeah, I have nothing but good things to say about it. I think that's all I have. Thank you. Oh, sorry, one more thing. I do have one more slide. We did a fantastic campaign where we took the insights that were provided to us from these stats that we generated on the back end of the system, and we shared it. We shared it out with the community. So it was kind of this full circle, because I really thought it was important for us to say, well, you told us this is what you said on the system. Let's share it with the community. And so we did that. And some of these images were actually shared with us from this. One of them is from Windsor Tourist Guides. Another one is from Windsor Eaton Photo Art. And then the other photo was taken by the museum themselves. So this is we're just getting the data from the users themselves, from the citizens themselves, and we're sharing it back to say, this is what you told us. So I just think it's really important to close that loop and just share that information back out. And now I'm done. Thanks, Tiernan.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Very well timed as well. Yeah, thank you very much for all the panelists. I think that's I think what I always love to see and hear is in various different walks of life and various different types of organizations is more involvement from the general public. I think, you know, in communities in general, whether it's public or private sectors, is, you know, historically we've seen, you know, maybe, you know, not as much effort being made to include more voices and bringing more kind of opinions to the table. So it's really great to hear that, you know, a variety of different organizations are looking to increase that. So thanks again for those. We have got a few questions coming in. I'll try and direct these to the relevant people. Jack, thanks for answering one of them, and Kathy, I know you addressed one of them. Maybe this is more one for Kathy, but does the tech allow you to monitor people visiting certain areas and the numbers of them, etc.?
Monitor certain areas. We received, well, we were in Windsor, and so we could see where they were visiting, which location they were visiting. So if it would say, these are your top visitors to these locations. So we could see what our top or most visited spots were. So we could see that a lot of people visited the what is it called? The train, the bus stop, Queen Victoria statue, and I can't remember the other one top of my head. I can look at the report. I'm sorry, but we could see where people were visiting. It is anonymous, so we cannot tell you who the people were. We don't have like an address or anything, but we can see what the top locations were. Yeah, so each just from a technological perspective, each of the objects or points of interaction, the platform can monitor how many people and how long they're interacting for, etc. This is potentially one for Tom. Can I ask if any of the organisations experience ill use of the technology, brackets, flooding the phone number? Oh, sorry, I read that as flooding, as in flooding. But and if so, what action take to reduce this or overcome this? So I think that's mainly around, do you see any ill use of the platform?
Yeah, no, I mean, the worst one, if I'm honest, was one of our directors who came down for a visit, who decided to have a random conversation with us about pigeons just to see what happened and if he could break the system. So we have one conversation in there which was a bit odd. The rest of them have been very well behaved, to be honest. We've had some really interesting interactions with the community. You get the odd ones where there's perhaps some slightly interesting answers in there or some misconceptions, which, you know, we're used to hearing. But no, I think actually we haven't seen a lot of people flooding them with erroneous messages. The key thing, a bit like Jack's alluded to in the chat, we're in the process of rolling out more sites at the moment. So for us, there's always a bit of a transient population over the autumn and the winter in the southwest. So when they're out over the summer, we're going to have more people using them. The chance of that happening will go up a little bit, but I'm assuming it will be proportional to the kind of response and use of the system that we've had so far. So it's not really been a problem at all.
Cheers. Thanks, Tom. Maybe this is one for Jack. There's one that's come in which says, what are you hoping to achieve by enhancing your public safety engagement? Quite a broad question.
Yeah, I think for us, it's specifically it's about, it comes down to making people safer. We have our main target really is reducing fires. We have so many incidents each year, and we want less and less. We want to keep making people safer. We want to have less fire injuries, less fire fatalities, and then ultimately less accidental house fires. The aim is obviously to have zero. Whether that's ever going to be possible, probably not. But that's what we're constantly striving for. So when we are going into schools, whatever engagement it is we do, it's about educating people, making people safer, with a then longer term view to reducing fire. So I guess with this specific work with Hello Lamppost, it's been for us about widening our net a little bit. We had that gap where if you were lower risk, you wouldn't get a home safety visit, but there was still that question around, well, what are we doing for these people? Because these people that are lower risk could still well have a fire. It does happen. So we want to hit more people, and I guess we're hitting a certain amount of people in the county through our schoolwork. We're hitting the most vulnerable through our work with partners and through our home safety checks. There's a gap then of people, I guess, in the middle who are lower risk, but still ultimately everyone's got a bit of risk they wanted to hit, and this is part of trying to get those people as well. So by hitting as many people as possible, obviously the longer term is reducing fires and incidents.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Jack. And there's one question that's come in which I can partially answer, but then I'll put to all of the panelists. It's how are the questions and engagement monitored? Are they automated responses, or does it require a physical person monitoring it? So a quick point on that is that the platform where it's deployed for whatever reason is completely automated. But maybe I'll put that to the panel just in terms of monitoring the responses and seeing the data that's coming out and how that's used.
I can go first if you want. So I don't know if you picked up on the final slide that I shared. There was a sort of flow chart. That's actually what we've been using to design the virtual object. So you have to design the whole conversation. What's the question you're going to ask? What sort of possible outcomes could there be to it? And what do you want to say in response? So it's automated, but you have to do some preparatory work. And the team at HLP have been brilliant at synthesizing all the stuff we've given them to work that conversation out. But we can get regular reports, and we can understand what's being provided, what sort of messages are coming out of it, and it's got a really good dashboard behind it that allows you to interrogate the data and see some of the stats, some of the trends, some of the kind of the key topics that are coming out. So that's one of the other aspects that's incidentally useful to me. Is it's not just about pushing information out, it's the feedback you get and the volume of feedback, rather than can you fill this form in and leave it by the door as you leave. People, I think, are maybe a little bit more open when they're using the tool. We get some much more useful feedback through that dashboard.
Go ahead, Jack. I've just seen you on mute.
I'd just probably that's a really good point Tom's made, actually, because I was going to think of the same thing just as he said it. We obviously have the engagement hub, which is really useful. That shows us how many conversations have been had and where people are doing it from what people are saying. But what people are saying has been really useful as well. We didn't set this up necessarily to get feedback from people. We wanted to, make people safer, ask questions in that sense. But what we're able to see is we ask questions, for example, do you own smoke alarms? Do you test them regularly? What we can see is, well, how many people actually own smoke alarms? If 500 people have done our checks, how many people out of those 500 have actually got smoke alarms? And then that helps direct our work. In the future, that might help, or we probably will start using that to direct our campaign work. For example, we ask people, do they smoke in bed? If we see a lot of people saying they do, that's clearly something we need to consider and maybe look at doing some campaign work around. So yeah, the stuff you get back is really useful, as well as what you're putting out.
Kathy, any further thoughts on that?
I was just going to say, I like that it's people people will sometimes say something to an inanimate object that they wouldn't say normally to another person or on a consultation. And you would get engagement that you normally wouldn't get when you use HLP. And that's what we've seen too. So I just think that it's just sort of non-judgmental, and you can just have a chat, and you might talk to people that you wouldn't normally engage. And that's what we've seen.
Great. Yeah, thanks everyone. A couple more questions that have come in, which I guess more practical ones. Are there any costings available? How long will it take to set up the conversations? We can share all of that information after the webinar. That's no problem at all. And it'll also have kind of contact details, etc. when you get the follow-up email from the webinar. Just in terms of how long it takes to set up the conversations, I think that probably would have varied between Windsor and South Yorkshire and the various different projects we're doing with the Environment Agency, but we typically try and say it's anywhere between kind of 2 to 8 weeks, depending on the scale and scope of priorities in the projects. Another one that's just coming in: has it been used as a consultation process before? If yes, how successful? Again, happy to share some case studies when it's been used in consultation. Typically, the platform is used on kind of more informal feedback gathering, and then directing towards more formal consultation processes. Tom, were you going to jump in there? So you can come off mute.
Yeah, all I was going to say was one of the sites that I put on the map, we've put out deployment with HLP before we're doing a scheme to reduce the risk for that community. So some of the others have been about pushing out information. That one's been about asking them questions and seeking feedback, which has been really valuable for us, because we miss lots of user groups because we don't get young families, we don't get younger people, we get the people that are around during the day, or we have to organise evening events, and then there's associated extra costs and that kind of thing with those. But the ability to ask either an open question and get all sorts of feedback, or a specific thing that you want to know as part of your consultation and get a limited number of responses to that, has been really useful to help with our decision making.
Brilliant. Thank you. We're short on time, so I'm going to have to call it to a close there in terms of the questions. We will try and follow up on some of the other questions that have been put in. Just after the webinar, as a heads up for everyone, there will be a kind of a follow-up email coming in, which will have everyone's contact details in case anyone has any further questions, wants to reach out. There will also be a survey, so we'd actually love to get everyone's thoughts and feedback on the webinar today and on everyone's kind of content in the panel presentations, and it will be in the form of a Hello Lamppost powered chat interaction. So all you need to do is kind of scan the QR code that's in the email, and it'll give you a kind of a friendly chat to give your feedback. It'll ask you questions, and it'll also give you a bit of a feel for the platform. But just to finish up, I just want to say an enormous thank you and a virtual round of applause for the panelists today. I think it's been fantastic and really, really insightful hearing from such a variety of organisations and roles. Well, that's clever. I haven't seen that before. A lot of clapping going on, virtual clapping at the bottom. But yeah, I just want to say a big thank you, and thanks everyone who joined the webinar as well, taking time out of your busy days to come along and listen to all of these great panelists. But yeah, we will be hosting another webinar in the near future, and I hope to see everyone there. But in the meantime, I hope everyone has a good rest of the day, and take a look out for our follow-up email. Thank you very much, and we'll send the recording in that follow-up as well. Thanks, everyone.